Good evening, everybody. We are reading Every Last Girl, and we are talking about Team Balika. Let us continue to read from where we stopped last time. We are on page 173. And then what came tumbling out was the promise and yet the pain points of our 10-year history. We had started in Pali district in 2007 and now had teams of Team Balika volunteers across 13 districts of India, spreading across Rajasthan and now into neighboring Madhya Pradesh. Up until today, our approach had been a strategy of 100% saturation of government identified critical gender gap districts. These districts are large, anywhere from 500 villages to 2,000 plus villages. To ensure we found every last girl, we would knock on every single home in the district. The sums were mind boggling. Every home in a 1,000 village district might add up to as many as 1 lakh houses, and knocking on every door might take us 6 years at our current rate. We needed a different approach. As the surveys were completed and patterns emerged, we started to see that in a large number of villages, all the girls were indeed going to school. Indeed, at one point, we concluded that around 20% of our villages didn't have a single out of school girl, and yet we had still knocked on every door in that village to check, expending time and expending hard raised resources. And then at the same time, we would have team members find an overwhelming 100 girls in one village, an unmanageable number for one person. It seemed so unpredictable. Questions and answers. If artificial intelligence is the answer, what is the question? We are not the government body, I finally concluded with an air of resignation, stating the obvious but also repeating a phrase my team had used a few years prior to question my aspirational plans to start our own census. We don't have limited resources. Hiring large teams, training, and safeguarding is a huge undertaking. I just feel like there must be a quicker, better, more cost effective way of doing all this. What I didn't expect next was what felt at the time like a totally futuristic and sci fi suggestion. What we were about to dig into was artificial intelligence. AI is now a commonplace topic of conversation that has people consumed by either fear or excitement, depending on their knowledge, temperament, or worldview. But back in 2017, it was much less understood, and there were little to no conversations about its application in the social sector. For me, it was very abstract and it felt far, far removed from our work, our villages, and our girls. At Educate Girls, we had embraced technology as a necessary and creative tool in the toolbox. We had GPS tracking for our teams. We used smartphones and dashboards. But we had also embraced all this with deep thought and with a healthy skepticism, knowing that nothing could replace human trust, human being, and human intelligence. But Buddy had other ideas. He asked me again, what is the problem you want to solve? What is your greatest challenge? My answer was, my greatest challenge is this. I need to get to the villages with the highest number of vulnerable girls as fast as possible. I wish we could just predict where we would find those villages. The more energetic and frustrated I sounded, the calmer and more composed Buddy became. And then a light bulb went on in his mind. The minute Safina used the word predict, it dawned on me that this was a classic machine learning challenge, Buddy recalls. We had ensconced in the meeting room at the ID Insight office for well over an hour now. The office, funnily enough, was a petty, nondescript building in downtown San Francisco that 8 years later would be sandwiched just 10 minutes from where the world's two biggest AI labs would establish their headquarters. Lalu the dog had wandered off to find another lap to lean on, and Buddy poked his head out of the door and started waving his hand at a colleague perched on a bright colored sofa on the other side of the loft who was just within earshot. Ben, he hollered, you have to come over here and meet Safina. Ben Brockman was an expert data scientist on the team whom I had not met before. He was usually based in Washington, so it was by fluke that he happened to be visiting San Francisco that day. As Ben made his way over, Buddy continued, this is all about prediction. It was a classic challenge that machine learning was incredibly well placed to solve, if and only if you had the right data. Companies used machine learning to inform their expansion plans. Buddy went on to explain. It helped them decide where to build supermarkets or distribution centers, or what demand for a product might be at a particular time of year in order to plan production. Ride apps use machine learning to predict when there will be surges in customers needing a ride, such as Saturday nights, when it is raining, or when the cinema closes, for example. There is no reason why we couldn't do this to find out school girls, forecasting the future based on the past. At the time, this type of data science was also new to ID Insight, and Ben was their first hire to focus on it in earnest. He had worked at ID Insight in a few years earlier, but had gone off to Harvard Kennedy School to complete his MPA and then thrown himself into the Clinton campaign, anticipating a role at the White House after the fated election. As Hillary lost the election, Ben had made his way to ID Insight to launch the data science component of the organization. When Ben told me that his policy thesis at Harvard had looked at how to use machine learning to predict school dropouts in Rwanda, I was quite blown away by how aligned his experience was going to be. First, we had a census for girls. Now we were talking about an algorithm. I thought to myself, I was pretty blown away. We sat for another hour, wonking out, as Buddy likes to say, talking in tech speak. On some occasions, my mind wandered off, and I looked over to Buddy's team as colleagues got up from their computers sporadically to chuck a basketball into the full-size net in the tiny courtyard. What went on in those computers again felt detached from the reality faced by our girls and our villages. But despite the fact that Ben and Buddy were talking in what seemed like a foreign language at times, I understood the potential was enormous. We were going to move from carpet bombing to precision targeting. After I left the meeting, their words were just buzzing around in my head. We had been so wedded to our door-to-door survey, it had seemed like it was the only way to find every girl. But we needed to make bolder action, become more strategic, and get to the right village to a majority of girls faster. Was artificial intelligence the crystal ball we needed? Teaching a machine to learn. So, how do you teach a machine? How does a machine learn? The key is the data you put in to train the machine to think or predict for itself. Past data is used to predict the future. Taxi apps use traffic data to predict how long you might have to wait for a car. Streaming apps use computer history to predict what music someone might want to listen to next. In our case, we thought we might be able to use data about families, villages, and schools that the government had to predict where outer schools might live, outer school girls might live. The key to this was having a lot of data about outer school girls and where they actually lived before we got started. And that was precisely what we had as a result of our years of work and our extensive door to door survey. Buddy and Ben waited to learn more about the data with a tinge of skepticism, as it is incredibly rare for an NGO to have the kind of data sets that would really allow prediction through machine learning. After our exciting meeting, I had left San Francisco for New York and got caught up with events and meetings. But as promised, within the week, I was able to get Buddy's team and mine together over a call to discuss what we had. In the first conversation, we shared the kind of data we had collected for one of our districts. Then Ben, impressed but still a little uncertain, asked me, "Could you give me a sense of approximate total numbers? How many homes have you actually surveyed and got the data for altogether?" Ben was perhaps trying to manage his expectations a little. But when I replied a few days later from my little hotel room in New York with the exact figures that equated to close to 1 million households, Ben got the answer he wanted. We had enough data to train the machine. We had a list of outer school girls across close to 8,000 villages. 10 years of painstaking work by our field teams and Team Balika was the gold mine they were looking for. Ben said, and what was amazing was that the data was already organized. Like I say, I love a tidy list. The team in India literally had all the data that was needed to do the training of the machine, all the technical stuff. And if we went on to execute, the impact upside was just way better than we could possibly have imagined, Buddy recalled. It was a story that still energized him today. Apparently, there were a lot of applications of machine learning that are not all that consequential and only really sound good on paper, not necessarily improving impact all that much. But after just the first rough cut of our data, Buddy's team was able to see that we had an opportunity to predict and find close to half the primary aged outer school girls in India. Now, that was huge. Predictable girls. What ID Insight did next in that loft office in San Francisco with Lalu the dog under their desks was scrape what is called predictor variables data from publicly available sources for 7,796 villages, chosen because we had been there recently and knew the actual number of outer school girls in each and every village. What were the literacy levels, caste, or tribe status, average family size, occupations, and school infrastructure like in the villages with the most out of school girls? The machine crunched all this data and learned where the correlations were between the girls' context and whether or not they were enrolled in school. The machine looked and it learned, deciding what predictor data was most relevant for our girls was the next puzzle. What would really help us predict whether a girl would go to school, or more precisely, predict that a parent was unlikely to enroll their girl in school? Was it their parents' literacy levels? Was it her proximity to the school? Was the parent's income a factor, or the fact that she was from a particular community? What made a girl predictable? A girl who was predictably out of school? As the team started to examine the data, all those names came flooding back to me. They were data points for the machine. For me, they were all stories. They were all lives. Anthimbala is a predictable girl. Her parents were illiterate. They are from an OBC Jats in Rajasthan. Anthimbala is from a relatively big family with three daughters born before her and the much awaited brother Rajkumar born 5 years after her. Her father works away at the brick kiln over the border in Gujarat. Her mother manages the tiny strip of land they rent, which provides some basic produce to the family with only a very small onion surplus to sell. The school in the village is very poorly attended. The girls' toilet is poorly maintained. The power cuts are long, and the secondary school is very far. All this adds up to Anthimbala not going to school. Mafi, sorry, is a predictable girl. Sorry, she is the eldest of four girls. Sorry, she is from the Mahayavanshi caste. Sorry, her father died of a heart attack. Faltu, useless, is a predictable girl, but she's far from useless. It is her father really who deserves a useless label, sadly spending most of the day inebriated. Neither of her parents have consistent work. She is from the Bhil tribe and without steady income. Faltu is usually forced to work in the agarbatti factory. She is the oldest girl in the family. The school is far and she's predictably out of school. To improve the predictions over time, we needed to decide what predictor data we would use. What did we think were the root causes of girls not going to school? What were the barriers to girls accessing their right to education? What were the reasons why Anthimbala was at home and not with her brother in the classroom? What did we need to know that might help us predict where to find the most out of school girls? What was very helpful at this stage in the evolution of our work was that the team in San Francisco understood India. Ben and Jeff, another colleague, had lived and worked in Bihar, the state in India with some of the most challenges for women and girls. They had a deep knowledge of the context of our work and had even brought their dog back to the United States from India. As they cleaned their data and ran the numbers, they sat beneath inspirational quotes from Mahatma Gandhi and knew the meaning behind what they were looking at. It wasn't news to them that 12-year-old girls were married, that schools often had no toilets, that parents' literacy rates were so low, and that child labor was pervasive. They could ask the right questions and understand what the numbers might be telling us. We gathered opinion from education, gender, and development experts, combined it with our deep knowledge of our communities, and narrowed the predictors down a bit, but still fed over 313 indicators into the machine. All data that was free and accessible and from trusted sources. The most comprehensive data set was, of course, the Indian census. And from this, we selected 233 indicators. What were the literacy levels in a village? An illiterate parent was undoubtedly a solid predictor that a girl might be out of school. We included religion, caste, employment status, and household income. The size of a household was also a clear indicator. The bigger the family, the higher the likelihood of out of school girls. We included the presence or not of a toilet in the house, the source of water, tap or well, and we even input what kind of roof a family had over their heads, pakka or kacha. On top of this, 118 indicators came from the District Information System for Education, where data points such as gross enrollment rates, girls' enrollments, school governance, and whether the school included the secondary grades were used. The more data, the better. Human versus machine. Once we had taught the machine, it was then time to test the predictions. In the first year, Vikram, by then our expansion lead and senior manager, and his team uh, already had a set plan for where they wanted to expand our programs. So, fueled with some healthy skepticism and a determination not to put all our eggs in one basket, rather than being led by machine learning, they carried on with their survey based on their own contextual knowledge and village selection. Simultaneously, Buddy, Ben, and Jeff ran predictions on those same villages. When the predictions were shared internally after the survey was completed, the findings surprised everyone. The tool was working much better than anticipated. And after just one iteration of the model, we realized the machine was able to help us to find between 50% more girls in some villages and a staggering 100% more girls in other villages. Over time, the machine has become more and more accurate at predicting where we will find the most out of school girls, where Anthimbala, Faltu, and Mafi are likely to live. It won't tell us exactly how many girls we will find in a village. It won't tell us which house, but what it will do is take a district and give us an idea of where there will be a concentration of villages with high numbers of out of school girls. It tells us relatively accurately if a village is likely to have above average or below average numbers of out of school girls so we can take decisive action about where to work. So we avoid villages where the machine says we will likely find less than 10 girls who don't go to school and go where the machine tells us we will likely find more than 50 out of school girls. When we first started working in this way, we were finding on average 18 girls in every village we decided to go to. After a few years and refinements to the algorithm, we were finding close to 42 girls per village, demonstrating that we were getting better and better at our predictions and going where the problem was greatest. We really think you should go here, Ben said, as his finger landed on a very dark part of his immaculate computer generated map, a very different document to our hand drawn village maps. We sat down with Ben on one of his visits to Mumbai. He and his team had been working hard on the latest map of clusters and were still negotiating their way around the operations team in India and their sensible suspicion. Ah, Vikram would respond with a slight told you so resignation. There is a mountain range just there that will take a field coordinator around 5 days to cross. Those villages can't be in this cluster. Ben paused and tried again. Well, this is an obvious area here, he proposed, hoping that another geological barrier would not emerge from the page. Ah, Vikram responded again with a hint of schadenfreude. There is a particularly difficult district education officer here. We have tried, but I doubt we will ever be able to work in those villages. He doesn't like us. I would observe these interactions with intrigue and hope. And of course, beneath all of this were ethical and practical questions. Just because the machine predicted something, it didn't mean we could always follow through. We needed to find talent. We needed the government to agree. We needed there to be a mountain in the middle of a village cluster. This was a hugely productive, creative tension that over time delivered better and better results. Over the course of a decade, we first put our Team Balika in place at massive scale and then integrated smart technology to make their job easier. People ask me about the ethics of a machine telling us where to work. But nowhere does a machine replace a human when it comes to individual girls. The machine just tells people where to go for maximum impact. The balance of human intelligence with artificial intelligence is the winning combination. And this approach has the potential to accelerate social change across a multitude of sectors. We had spent 10 years demonstrating that we could target a district and go to every village and every household to find out of school girls. We had demonstrated that we could not only find girls but also sustainably enroll them in school. And something I haven't mentioned yet, we were also significantly improving learning outcomes for all the girls and boys in schools where we worked. Having said all this, however, if we wanted to find Anthimbala, every last girl, quicker, we needed to work out which of India's villages would have the most out of school girls and only look there. And now we had an algorithm to make it happen. The government data was telling us there were over 4.1 million primary aged out of school girls in India. This became our universe and our North Star. Overwhelming numbers can encourage apathy in some, but to me, they are a red rag to a bull. Another important figure is this: 85% of India's schools are in villages, and 74% of India's children live in rural India. If there are 4.1 million out of school girls, the majority we could assume will live in villages. We needed a unit of expansion, and India's soulful villages were the obvious answer. The 2011 census data, which was and still is the most comprehensive data set available to us, and from where we drew our predictor data, had counted just over 6,40,000 villages. If each village was only a couple of miles across and you positioned them next to one another, they would wrap around the earth 13 times. As we sat there, under the Gandhi quote in the ID Insight office, be the change you want to see in the world. And in the process of all this data analysis and machine learning design, we had a huge Eureka moment. If you gather enough data, you start to see patterns. And what we were seeing was that in the majority of villages like Agarpura, we were finding just one or two girls who weren't going to school, sometimes none. In fact, almost half the villages we went to had only one or two girls. When Ben and Buddy drew this up in a graph, we could see that close to 40% of all our outer school girls were living in just 5% of the villages we had visited. This was a concentration problem, no longer universal. Of the 6,40,000 villages in India, we only needed to go to 30,000. Finally, this seemed like a manageable number. As our saturation census-like approach unraveled, a new, more targeted possibility emerged. The model was making it all the more imperative that we worked out where to look. If we can confidently assume that 40% of the outer school girls live in just 5% of the villages, I believe we can teach a machine to tell us which villages we need to go to when announced. Teaching a machine to predict areas of such vulnerability where that marginalization and negative mindset intersect has the potential to be game-changing. An out-of-school girl can be a proxy for poor malnutrition, prevalence of child marriage, incidence of gender-based violence and vulnerability to child trafficking or child labor. Finding every last girl has a huge multiplier effect. And so anything we can do to find her faster deserves this human and technological effort. Combination therapy. Over next 5 years, we spent delivering on this audacious goal and putting our movement and our machine learning into practice to unlock the huge multiplier effect that is girls' education. One thing I really want to emphasize here is that all this human and technological effort was also accelerated by the tailwind we experienced as government efforts gained huge momentum during this period. Our movement of Team Balika members, guided by the machine learning predictions, had a much easier job once they reached a village because of our alignment with government policy. Progress that was being made at the systems level to build incentives and financial support for the families who had previously been left behind acted like combination therapy. The right dose of community action, civil society programming, and government policy started to deliver. The physical barriers dissolved as the RTE mandated a school within 1 kilometer of every village. This meant that the mantra, the school is too far, no longer held. Our Team Balika volunteers' job was focused far more now on mindset than the distance to school. Economic marginalization, of course, still reared its head. But here the Rajasthan government put schemes in place to support families financially. The Mukhyamantri Rajashri Yojana was one such scheme applicable for girls born in or after the 1st June 2016. This offered a mother $600 over the course of a daughter's first 18 years and was linked to milestones like institutional birth, full vaccination, and then enrollment and transition through the 4 stages of school, essentially incentivizing good health practices and every girl's presence in school. Perhaps most significantly of all was Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, also launched at this time, 2015, that after years of denial acknowledged the existence of widespread son preference, a societal blight that we have discussed in such harrowing depth earlier. all of a sudden, this initiative saw slogans and placards, posters and films on billboards, the back of rickshaws and buses, in cinemas and the internet, and across the length and breadth of the country, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi spearheading the movement and politicians fronting social media campaigns with selfies with their daughters. It may seem slightly trite, but it worked. And all this communication and elevation of the importance of girls, this acknowledgement that girls and boys are treated differently, made a huge contribution to our work. We had the law to back up our enrollment drives, and we had this groundswell of messaging that amplified a girl's right to be safe and to thrive through education. The biggest, most complex barrier of them all, namely mindset, was finally being tackled head on. This combination of government policy with grassroots, individual and community action, merged with technology, accelerated our pace of work and delivered on an audacious plan to support the enrollment of 1.5 million out of school girls across 5%, just a minute, across 5% of India's villages back into school or into a classroom. Finally, we were working at speed. All right, we will stop here before we go on to the next chapter. I think one of the most important things in this chapter was the introduction of this AI device to help them to reach out to more and more girls. And, and I think the portion which really touches most, it really pains, is to read those names of the girls. In this chapter, we have all these names, Anthimbala and all kinds of names that we just read, sorry, Mafi, and stuff like that. That really pains. So, any thoughts? Has is
Well,
Yeah,
in
Meenakshi.
India, I don't know about the rest of the world, but just imagine a girl is so, I mean, they use the word faltu.
Yes.
Yes, right, as a name. For them, that they don't even bother thinking of a nice name for their,
Yeah.
that is
It.
one thing. It hurts, right? Because
Yes.
it hurts that I'm a woman, I have a daughter, and there's so many. I mean, women I'm associated with. Why should women be treated in such a horrible manner, even if they're not economically independent? Let's put it
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh, and uh, uh, just imagine the condition of the parents, I would say,
Yeah.
who give birth to
They
such
don't
children.
think of what will happen to the girl as she grows up. So
They
that's
don't,
the pity. Yes.
and they cannot enjoy, like normally when a child is
Yeah.
born, we take a lot of pleasure
No,
in the
not it.
growth of the
Anyway,
child.
things are slowly making a difference.
Yeah,
I
it
see
is,
a
but
change. Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
I'm
Pushpita.
supposed.
Sorry, Minakshi, you were saying something more?
I'm just saying that I mean, yes, it's making a difference. I've not come across any such name as of
Yeah.
now, except in this
Yes.
book, which is a good thing. Which is a
Absolutely.
good
Yes. Yeah. Pushpita, your hand is raised. No. Yes.
Naming that we're talking
Good evening.
about, and the fact that parents can think of that name for their children is really, really very thoughtful. I forget what society says about girls. Parents say that,
Yeah.
then that that is so founded.
We aren't able to hear you clearly. Pushpita, are you there? Okay, so yes, Pushpita, please talk. There a problem? There seems to be some problem. Is Myra still there or has she logged out? I would like to know what are Myra's feelings as she reads about all these things that the girls of these villages have been going through.
Ma'am, Myra is not there.
Not there. She's logged out, I think. Yeah. Right. So, great. If any other things that we want to share, or we can then close over here before we begin the next chapter next week. And it's nice that you all took time, but I wish we had more people getting exposed to the material in this book, because it's such it's actually quite a motivating thing to think that these kind of hurdles have been overcome. And the other good fact over here in this chapter I realized is that the wonderful way in which AI has been integrated very positively, and it's been a combination of the work of AI and humans. So it's the human effort where the human beings made use of the AI to help them to source girls. And I think this is how the world should use AI and not allow AI to guide us or rule over us. So this is a wonderful example. So I this is what I wanted to kind of ask Myra about, because she's the younger generation growing into more and more into the use of the AI,
Yeah,
right?
it gave us an idea that we could be using AI as well in very various manners. I
Yeah,
could never imagine AI finding out villages with more uneducated girls who are
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
people to
So
go
it's
to.
quite an eye opener here also to see the amount of, and to see that they have actually researched and gone into it and used it in a manner. And this is not like as if it's happening right now. It just happened a few years ago, but still, it's a wonderful initiative and a wonderful motivator for many people, right? All right. Good evening, everybody who joined. Thank you. Thank you, Manisha ma'am, for facilitating us. And we shall meet next Thursday.
Thank
Good
you, ma'am.
evening.
Pleasure is all mine. And very good evening to everyone
Good
for
evening,
joining. See you the
everyone.
next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye. Take care.
Bye.